We have our Prime Minister of Canada there, and we have our President of Mexico. And we've worked closely with those two countries, and the coordination and friendship and relationship has been outstanding. And I want to thank you both very much, and your countries very much.
Prime Minister Mark Carney met with the U.S. President and the President of Mexico this past week for the FIFA World Cup draw, and there was some trade talk. Relations between the three nations were upended earlier this year by Trump's sweeping tariffs. That's already been a year. But how successful was the trip to Washington for Mark Carney? What should we be watching for next? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Charelle Evelyn, the managing editor of the Hill Times. Kathleen Levesque is the parliamentary reporter for the National Post. And Tonda MacCharles is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Good to see you all. Beyond the dancing and the niceties that happened at that event in Washington on Friday, there was this conversation that happened behind closed doors that we know very little about. I don't know, Tonda, what how good you are at reading body language and things, but it did seem as though everyone was getting along. I wonder whether you think that there was progress made there and whether things could sort of get back on the track of at least talking trade.
I mean, honestly, who knows? The readout that we got from the Prime Minister's office, I think the only thing I seized on there was that they agreed to keep working together on CUSMA. So that comes in a week when the U.S. has undertaken public hearings and a deep dive into the benefits or disadvantages from the U.S. point of view to the trade agreement, the three-way trade agreement. And what we saw in Washington on Friday was the first three-way meeting of the three North American leaders in the context of, a tariff war that's affected Canada more than Mexico to a certain extent, and has forced both Canada and Mexico to, reprise a whole bunch of policies, including border spending. So I think heartened by the fact that they came out and talked about that deal and continuing to work on it. I'm told it was a positive vibe in that room where there were no staff, but that's, it remains to be seen. I don't think anyone underestimates the fact that Trump could turn around tomorrow and make a new threat.
Yeah, and it does, I mean, speaking of new threats, I guess it's not a new threat, Charelle, but there has been talk this past week as well about just not moving forward with this deal any longer, that there's an opportunity to say we're out. I think it's in July, and for the deal to end altogether. I don't know either how real that is or if that's just a leverage point for the president, but that is concerning, obviously, for Canada, Charelle.
Oh, absolutely. But also, Canada's been here before with this particular president. Yeah. He threatened to tear up NAFTA, and we ended up with the Canada-U.S. Mexico Agreement. Donald Trump has said time and time again, he's been musing, we might just get out of it. We might just strike our own deals individually with Canada and Mexico. There's always a lot of, though I do find there's always a lot of placating when it comes to things that Donald Trump says, and people like to brush it off kind of and say, he doesn't mean it, he's joking, it's a tactic, etc. But I find that more often than not, it's usually only a fraction of the time that he's actually just, kidding. Yeah. There are many things that he does actually follow through on, not least of which is rounding up his own country's citizens. So you have to take that seriously, and therefore you have to be prepared for all eventualities with this president, because as cordial as everything was in Washington on Friday, earlier in the week, Donald Trump had said, when he was asked about CUSMA negotiations and whether or not what he wanted to come out of them, and he mused about going his own way. And he said Mexico and Canada have taken advantage of the United States just like everybody else. So that was a slightly different tone than what he struck on Friday once everybody was there in the same room with him.
Yeah, I don't know, Catherine. It is so hard to, it's like we're trying to, read fog, essentially, when you try to understand what the president's tactics are. And I imagine that's complicated for this government. But when you hear him even just musing out loud about it, I mean, that's concerning, given that we're just dealing with those sectoral tariffs right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's extremely concerning. And I remember at this time last year, we were wondering if Donald Trump would actually go ahead with tariffs. And, a lot of us were saying, no, he won't actually do that. That's crazy. And you know what? He actually did. He imposed tariffs on, his largest trading partner. So look, I would take those threats seriously. That being said, I think what we heard to Tonda's point this week, an overwhelmingly majority of businesses in the U.S. Saying that CUSMA was good for them, that it was positive, and there was, of course, some criticism, notably for Canada for the dairy sector, the fact that U.S. producers think that they don't have enough access to our dairy sector. But again, I think overwhelmingly it was mostly positive. So look, I think it's normal for Donald Trump to kind of put out the worst case scenario. The fact of the matter is that he could actually do that. There is a clause in this in CUSMA that any country could pull away with 6 months' notice. So I think the Canadian government is acutely aware that this is a possibility. And I can imagine that behind closed doors, Prime Minister Carney and President Sheinbaum were, trying to, make this case that CUSMA should continue, that it's good for all three countries instead of having bilateral deals or just not having this agreement at all.
Tonda, do you think that the government's strategy now is not to I'm not going to say not to worry about the sectoral tariffs, but to track all of this through CUSMA and understand that the sectoral tariffs may remain in place until the renegotiation starts?
I think that this government will take any opening it sees to resume any kind of trade talk whatsoever. So the sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, lumber, and copper are very punishing, particularly in aluminum and steel. And Canada is shedding jobs left, right, and center in those sectors. The aluminum industry is managing a little better. Absolutely. At the outset, let's just dial back a bit. A few months ago, Mr. Carney wanted a comprehensive economic and security agreement and, wasn't going to do piecemeal agreements. And then when Trump slapped on the sectoral tariffs and then raised them again, absolutely, Carney engaged then on sectoral tariffs and put the other stuff aside for a few, after the first part was done. Look, I think that they are in the process of adapting to whatever comes out of the White House and, more importantly, the U.S. Trade Representative's office in terms of actual negotiations and talks. Is there a cohesive, coherent strategy on the Canadian side? I think it's an adaptive one. They have to adapt to whatever comes out and mitigate whatever damage they can. And right now they're in also mitigation and adaptation mode in terms of, diversifying Canada's economy and different sectors and trying to deal with laid off workers, So we see, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars sort of in packages, various different packages, trying to address those layoffs right now. And that's a political challenge for this government.
For sure. Last 30 seconds to you, Charelle.
I don't know that if there's much, as Tonda says, that, this would adapt to strategy, because Donald Trump, it doesn't seem like he really wants to deal right now, because he's not really getting what he wants out of Canada. Last time he threatened to walk away, he got the concessions on the digital services tax. This time, after the Ontario ad, it was crickets. So he might feel that it's in his best interest to say, I've got some tariffs in place. That might be as much as I'm going to get for now, and we'll have to wait for the CUSMA talks to really get into the nitty-gritty.
Charelle, that was an amazing 30 seconds. Kudos to you for being able to do that. Charelle, Tonda, Catherine, you'll start us off on the next round. Thank you all very much.
There is clearly a sentiment by some Albertans that they don't see themselves in the Federation. But we also have to be careful, because we have a very strong separatist movement in Quebec. Using a solution that failed before, we're trying to appease separatist movement in part of the country by fueling them in another part of the country.
That's Quebec Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault, former cabinet minister, from our conversation earlier, laying bare his warning to his own party leader on the risks to the Canadian Federation. How serious is the risk to the government from Quebec, and has a possible pipeline satisfied critics in Alberta? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Charelle Evelyn, the managing editor of the Hill Times. Catherine Levesque is a parliamentary reporter for the National Post, and Tonda MacCharles is the Ottawa bureau chief for the Toronto Star. All of us in Ottawa this morning. Nice to see you all again. I want to talk about the Opposition Day motion that is going to be heard this week as well, that is also about pipelines. But Catherine, let me start with you about Stephen Guilbeault's comments that what the government was intending to do to try and deal with Alberta has, in his view, increased separatist sentiments in Quebec because it also has meant the rollback of a lot of climate initiatives. What did you make of this take by the former minister, and how serious could it be?
I think it was a little premature to make that statement right away. Just to give you an idea, the discourse against Ottawa this week, and certainly from the separatist movement, was more focused on Mark Miller and his comments about the decline of the French language. And he said he was tired of the debate being so political. So, there really wasn't that much talk about the pipeline in Alberta. The other caveat I would add to Mr. Guilbeault's comments is that I think a lot of Quebecers, have known for a very long time that actually the federal government is going to be pro-pipeline. Like the MOU in Alberta was not really news to them. Certainly when the federal government bought the TMX pipeline, I think they knew right there and then that is contrary to a lot of Quebecers' values. And what I would also say is that certainly. Like last time, the Alberta, they lost a lot of seats in Alberta. I think we might see some seats lost in Quebec, but sorry, I remembered what I meant to say.
Yes,
I think to Mr. Guilbeault's point, it's been a long year, guys. To Mr. Guilbeault's point, I think it is fueling the sentiment that that Ottawa could go against the provinces, certainly because they signed this MOU with Alberta against British Columbia's wishes, and so there is a sentiment that maybe something like that could happen in Quebec, and I know that's something that the Bloc Québécois has been pushing and has even connected with British Columbia's government over that.
Yeah, I mean, it is probably too soon to know for sure, but there's lots of context inside Quebec, Tonda. The PQ surging in the polls, likely to form government in the next election if things keep on the same track. So Mr. Guilbeault, I think, was sort of just sounding the alarm about how this could appear to Quebec. I don't know how real it is and whether that's something that the Liberals need to be concerned about politically.
I mean, I think where I would disagree with Mr. Guilbeault's characterization of it, he seemed to suggest in that one comment about that the effort in Alberta was bent on fueling separatism in Quebec. And I don't think anyone is convinced of that. To Catherine's point, yes, it's been a long year. But I think what's looming is a pretty big year in Quebec politics that the country, and I think the Liberal government, has yet to really focus on and pay attention to, and that is the potential and likely election of a Parti Québécois government promising a referendum on separation in the next mandate. So, look, that's something that there are some Liberals within Carney's government who believe that they haven't paid enough attention to. And yes, I've heard the same thing you have as well, Rosemary, that the Carney government, and Carney in particular, was quite worried about the rise of a separatist sentiment in his home province, his native, where he grew up anyway, of Alberta. But it's hard to sort of really understand, in the context of the pipeline debate, which faction in Alberta is going to hold the day. Look, the polls are showing that this is going over, and it's early days. This is going over well in Alberta. It's going over well across the country because of the economic threat that the country is facing. And that so far, at least, and this could change depending on how vehement the opposition is among Indigenous communities and in BC, but a majority, there's more people across the country in all regions basically that support it, or the idea of building something that protects Canada, than there is against it at this stage. So look, I think that is the pipeline project, or the notion of a pipeline, because we don't actually have a project proposal yet, fueling something? I think what we have to say, it comes against a backdrop of concerns regionally about whether their interests and values are being protected.
Yeah, and Charelle, is it good to go to you? And because your home province, BC, feels now, its own sense of upset. And I'm not saying there's separatist sentiment there, but it's almost, this is the difficulty in running the country, is you can displace and upset people from one region to another based on what's wanted. So it's hard to know whether this has helped or hurt the issue that the Prime Minister seemed concerned with.
Yeah, I do believe that there's always going to be a component and contingent of people who are going to be unhappy, regardless of the outcome. I think that's very clear. Even I know you said we were going to talk about the Conservatives' motion, and even just within that, it kind of seems like it's inherently contradictory. Talking about do we support this pipeline while respecting the duty to consult that we have with Indigenous peoples? And that's how can you unequivocally support something if once you've consulted and found vehement opposition? It's kind of always going to be something for somebody. And even with Alberta, what we're seeing, with the UCP not being overly happy. Alberta's always going to have Ottawa as a scapegoat for something. And if it's not energy, it's going to be something else. It could be the notwithstanding clause. It could be, all kinds of
guns,
things. So there's always going to be some reason that somebody in some portion of the country is going to be unhappy, just because that is how our federal system is set up.
So Catherine, let's talk a little bit about that Conservative motion then, Opposition Day motion, which sure is about wanting to demonstrate support for the energy sector, but is also perhaps more about putting the cat amongst the pigeon and trying to flesh out whether Liberals have a problem inside caucus that goes beyond Stephen Guilbeault.
Absolutely. I think they really want to, as they have done for many other subjects, they really want to put on the record which Liberal MPs actually support this MOU and which do not. I know on social media they have been tagging specific MPs who have actually been very vocal against this MOU. But at the same time, I would also say this comes maybe with an opportunity for Liberal MPs to maybe, tell their voters, look, I'm against this project or I'm for this project. Yeah. And it's not I don't think it'll be a huge surprise to us either, who votes against this or with this project. We know that, for instance, the Liberal MPs in the Surrey area, they are in favor of a pipeline, and, some others, I know Will Graves, Tlaib Noor Mohammed, they have been pretty vocal against this potential pipeline. So, look, again, it's always political. This is, it's meant to be a trap, but at the same time, I think it'll be an opportunity to clear the air.
Last 30 seconds or so to you, Tonda, on that motion.
I think that motion is a lot of mischief making on behalf of the Conservatives, and good on them. That's what politics is all about. They're trying to wedge the Liberals, expose divisions. There are some also divisions within the Conservative caucus over whether or not everybody supports tougher industrial carbon pricing, and the leader doesn't. So look, lots of mischief to be made in Parliament over this. I'm interested to see whether the Liberals whip the vote. So far, they haven't answered my question on that.
Okay, Charelle Evelyn, Catherine Levesque, Tonda MacCharles. Catherine, we all agree with you. It has been a very long year, and I probably won't see you now till next year. So enjoy your holidays and your break. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye-bye.